the Barretta Brothers.
On this episode, I'm joined by Dave Goelz. Dave is an Emmy Award-winning puppeteer who has performed with the Muppets since the mid-'70s. He's originated such characters as Uncle Traveling Matt, Zoot, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew, and the iconic Gonzo. He's also a Muppet designer, Muppet builder, and is co-executive producing the new Fraggle Rock series. He's also won a special Oscar for his understated choreography in The Parent Trap. He's with me today because he has some wonderful stories to tell. Unlike the long-form interviews we usually do on our show, these mini episodes give our guests the chance to share one favorite memory about each of these very special people. Dave Goelz, what can you tell me about Jerry Nelson?
Jerry Nelson and I had a game that we played. It started the first time I went to London with the Muppets, and it was for the Herb Alpert special. And we were rehearsing one day in rehearsal hall, and actually in the carpentry shop. We were rehearsing in the carpentry shop. And they were building a set, and Jerry went over behind this new set and pulled a little knot out of the framing for the set, and it was about a half-inch in diameter, maybe an inch long. And he walked over and handed it to me, and I said, "What's this?" And he said, "It's a knotty problem." And of course, I knew what the game was because the Muppet history is rife with stories about people passing objects back and forth over the years. Uh-huh. And the idea of the game is to not be stuck with the object. You want to get it back to the other person as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. So there was a legendary one with a cherry Danish that started with Jerry Jewell and Frank Oz. And it went back and forth between them until it was moldy and then rotten. And it went on and on for years. And then Jerry...
You weren't even allowed to buy a new Danish. It had to be the exact same one?
It had to be the same one. So this decrepit, awful, putrefying Danish went back and forth. And then Jerry Jewell made a board game about the Danish. And he executed it, like a regular board game with all the graphics and everything. Right. And I think Susan Jewell has that now. But anyway, so I was aware of this history, and I knew that I did indeed have a knotty problem. Well, that went back and forth between us for 20 years. You would hide it in somebody's lunch. You would put it in their hoodie. You would sneak it to them in one way or another. And it went back and forth and back and forth. And finally, I got it. And I thought, I'm going to make a nice wooden case for it lined with red velvet. And so I made this beautiful case, and the knotty problem just sat in the velvet. And I packaged it up and mailed it to him, and I never got it back. He lived for, several more years, like 5-8 years after that, but I never got it back. I think I made it too attractive for him.
Right? Why give it up?
And I've actually asked Jan, his wife, if she's come across it, and she hasn't seen it. So I don't know where it is.
I'm curious though, if with a game like that, do you have to tell the person once you've discovered it, or could you have to wait years and years until you just receive it again out of the blue?
Well, generally, I think the etiquette probably is generally that you acknowledge that you've got it.
Okay.
You might say, "Nice one," right?
Because that's a whole part of the whole pleasure of it is to know that they got it and they saw it and they got the joke and everything, right?
Yeah. Now they're stuck with it and they have to get it back to you, and you're on guard. You're on high alert. There are just so many of these stories like this. At one point, Steve Whitmire and I had started one where we were doing an appearance at the Hollywood Bowl, and Steve lost his voice. He had something really wrong with his voice, and so he ended up having to have a steroid shot from a doctor so that he could go on and perform at the Hollywood Bowl. However, before that, I went across the street. He was staying in the day before the Hollywood Bowl in the hotel. I went across the street to a drugstore and I bought all these remedies, anything that could possibly help. And I sent it to him, and he was very grateful. And he said, "How much was that? I'll pay you back." And I said, No, don't pay me back. It wouldn't mean anything then. So he slipped me $40, 2 20s. And of course, I slipped it back to him, and it went back and forth a few times. And of course, now we've been to our homes. Months have gone by, and we're back in LA again. And I thought, I know how to get it to him this time. So I rolled it around a really nice pen, and I gave it to him for some kind of, like a present, And so he could tell it was a pen or something, and so he opened it up. It was just wrapped in paper, and he had the $40 again, and so he cleverly slipped it to me before we left Los Angeles. Well, the day that we were leaving, he brought his suitcase in, and I zipped it into one of the external pockets on his suitcase. It was unused. You know how suitcases have those zippers on the side, but you never put anything in there because it's just a flat place.
Right.
So I put the $40 in there, and he never found it. And as far as I know, he still hasn't found it, and probably the suitcase is in a dump somewhere.
Yeah, right. He may have just thrown it away.
Yeah, but this is how these things go,
Dave Goelz, what can you tell me about Richard Hunt?
Well, I'll tell you a story that I don't know whether you've heard this or not, but Richard Hunt always wore, in the Muppet Show days, one outfit. It was a pair of painter's pants, which are the kind of pants that have loops on the sides to hold, rollers and things, and lots of pockets, and they're white. And he always wore those. He wore, I guess it was Converse sneakers. And then he wore a rugby shirt, a long-sleeved rugby shirt in bold red and white or green and white stripes.
I can picture that from photos I've seen.
Yeah, that was Richard Hunt's daily outfit. So one evening during the first season, there was a party at Gillian Lynn's house. She was one of our choreographers on The Muppet Show. She later went on to become famous for choreographing Cats and a whole bunch of other stuff. Anyway, I showed up at the party, and, we all dressed up a little bit, but Richard was wearing a pair of bally loafers and green cords and a rust-colored shirt and a jacket that I can't quite recall. All of a sudden, he looked completely different, and I realized that he had maybe just one outfit that he had purchased in London for occasions like this. And it was really cool because he looked great. He looked absolutely amazing in it.
Right.
But Monday morning, back in the painter's pants and rugby shirt.
One work outfit, one out on the night.
I think that was it. And the rest of the time, he was just having fun.
Dave Goelz, what can you tell me about Caroll Spinney?
Caroll Spinney was unbelievably nice to me. I met Frank Oz at a puppetry festival in 1972 in August. And about a month later, I had a business trip to the East Coast. So I took a week of vacation time and went to Sesame Street every day. Now, I started on a Monday, and Frank, who had arranged it for me, wasn't coming in until Friday. But I guess he let Caroll know that I was coming, and Caroll couldn't have been more nice. He welcomed me, and he was just a sweetheart. And Caroll worked every day on Sesame Street, and Frank just worked on Fridays. So the very first day, Caroll invited me to lunch, and we went across the street and had lunch. He had bought my lunch, and he doesn't know me from Adam. He was just a nice guy. So, and of course, I was just sitting there thinking, good Lord, I'm having lunch with the guy who does Big Bird. Right. It was just huge to me because Big Bird, even at that point, that was 1972. He was iconic already. And I just couldn't believe that the people who did these characters were so nice. So that was my story about Caroll. Oh, and later in the week, I think it was, what would it have been? I don't know, sometime after Monday, I brought my puppets over. I had them in a cardboard box, and I showed Caroll my puppets. He said, you make really good puppets. You should go see Bonnie Erickson in the workshop. And he called her, and I did go over one afternoon and saw Bonnie. And what she later told me, like in the last year, was that my puppets were of a professional quality, and so she could actually imagine them being used. Most of the puppets that people bring in are not that good, she said. But anyway, she said, Jim ought to meet you, but he's in France right now, so we can't do it. Anyway, a month later, Jim called me at my desk at Hewlett-Packard in Silicon Valley. And I flew down to LA to meet him when he was down there to shoot a Perry Como special. But that's just how fluky the whole career was, And Caroll played a big part in it. He also played a big part in Steve Whitmire's career. He was in Atlanta, and he saw Steve working, and made sure that Steve met Jane Hunt, and that's how they established the contact between Steve and the company, and it later led to him becoming an incredible performer.
Wow. And you know, the way you're mentioning how impressed you were with how humble and how just approachable these veteran performers were. I'm sure that there are people saying the same thing about you after they've met you, because it seems to just pass from one performer, Henson performer, to the next that way. They carry that spirit through.
Somehow it does. I mean, all of the people that we have working now, some of the people we have working now didn't even meet Jim. They had never met him, let alone worked with him.
Right.
But they carry on the protectiveness of the characters and the ethos of inclusiveness and all of the philosophical things that were a part of Jim that led to the creation of the Muppets. And somehow little kids watch this, they absorb it, and then they grow up and they come work with us.
Yeah.
It is a remarkable self-perpetuating thing.
Right, right.
Except for Bill Barretta. He's kind of a rough one.
Yeah, you know, you try to talk to him, you try to
he won't talk.
Influence, pass on some wonderful things. Sorry. And he's just too stone-headed. He won't listen to a thing. And so, you know,
the ego is just pushes everything out of the room.
Right, right. He's big man in the room. Yeah. Can't tell me anything.
I'm Italian.
Yeah.
I might put a contract out on you.
Yeah, he thinks he's Frank Sinatra.
Yeah. No, Billy is another one of those people who's just the right guy.
Well, Dave, what can you tell me about Jane Henson?
Jane Henson always flew economy. This was what blew my mind about her. Here she was, co-owner of the Muppets, and I would run into her everywhere I was in the world. Like, wherever we went to shoot, Jane would stop by and say hello. She was like a roving ambassador for the company. And what I learned about it from, people who, like her assistant and so forth, was that she always flew economy. She did not want first class. She didn't want special treatment. And man, when you travel a lot, it's just hard work to travel. It's not fun. It's crowded and there are lots of delays, and you spend the whole day getting somewhere, maybe the whole day and whole night getting somewhere. And, any comfort that you can find on that plane is highly welcome, but she never did it. She just flew economy.
So would she even fly if Jim might be up in first class and she would sit separately if she was traveling together? Or
I don't think I have that. I don't know about that for sure. But there was a situation where I think Jane was flying up to Toronto with a bunch of Henson people who were working on Fraggle Rock. And one of them was in first class and Jane was in economy with the others. And the first class person went back and said, you go ahead and take the seat. And she said, oh, no, absolutely not. No, she wouldn't do it.
Cool.
There's a humility about that and a groundedness that I really loved.
Finally, Dave Goelz, what can you tell me about Jim Henson?
What can I tell you about Jim Henson that you don't already know? Let's see, what's the Jim story? I have a couple of little Jim stories that I may have told them somewhere. I think I've told them somewhere else before, but one of them was my girlfriend was a costume designer, and at one point in the early 80s, I needed a tuxedo. I thought I'm just going to need a tuxedo, so I'll get one made. She said, yeah, I know somebody who can make a great tuxedo for you. And so I had him make a tuxedo and a suit. And sidebar on that, the fittings, normally he did a measuring and 2 fittings and then delivered. Well, he came to the studio like 3 or 4 times. He said, I have never seen an anatomy like yours, because my whole right shoulder was just overdeveloped, right?
Oh, right.
Yes. All the muscles on my back. I was asymmetrical. My center line of my neck out to here, it's 1 inch shorter than it is from here to here.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he came back like extra times to fit those suits. So that's the end of the sidebar. The day I picked the suits up, or the day he delivered them, I took them home and I thought, wow, that's great. I have a tux of my own now, custom made. And we were having Jim over for dinner that night, and he brought Patsy Dillard, his secretary, with him. And I answered the door, and here was Patsy in an evening gown and Jim wearing a tux. Now, this was, a little house in St. Albans. It was a small place. It wasn't a fancy place, but it was really, lots of atmosphere, a nice little spot. And I said, Jim, what you're wearing a tux? And he said, I thought this was black tie. And I said, no, but hang on a second. Come on in. And I went up and put on my tux, and Annie put on a nice dress, and we had a great evening. And Jim would never admit that he knew my tux had been delivered. I said, Jim, why would you wear a tux? He said, oh, I just thought it was black tie. He would never admit it, which I love. I love when you stick to your story.
Right.
Here's another story about Jim. So I was, it was the summer of '83, and we were shooting The Muppets Take Manhattan on a stage called the Empire Stage, which was underneath the Long Island Expressway. If you go out through the tunnel toward Long Island, the road, the highway raises up for a while and goes high, and then it goes down again. And you end up in the other end of Long Island. But when it's high, it's right over this building that was Empire Stages. And that's where we shot all the interior stuff, all the set work, studio stuff for the movie. So one day at lunchtime, Jim gathered everybody together, and he said, I have a presentation to make. And he said, Dave, congratulations on 10 years with the company. And he gave me this present. I unwrapped it, and it was a big clock that looked like a pocket watch. It had a brass rim on it. It had a chain, a big stem on it, and a big ring with the chain hanging down. Right. And on it was a little message in fine script that said, to Dave Goelz, for devotion. I can't remember exactly, but it's something like for devotion unequaled, except for a couple of other people. Anyways, that was the essence of it.
With a little asterisk, except for a couple other people.
No, just all part of the one sentence, like you don't know it's coming. And it was so great. And I have it out in my office. If we'd done this in my office, I would have shown it to you.
You know what story's never been told? Do you mind telling that story about the joke that Steve Whitmire played on you during the making of Muppets from Space?
While we were down in North Carolina shooting Muppets from Space, I got an odd email from a fan, and he couldn't put two sentences together. It was something like, "Hi, Dave. I got your email from a girl I know. No, from a girl I met." It was very unclear. I like your work. Good going. And it was just so incoherent. So that was in the beginning of this whole 3-month shoot. And at the other end of the shoot, we were in the set one day. The AD came over to us, second AD came over and said, "Your guest is here." Well, I was expecting my landlady to come today. And I said, "Oh, just have her come over here." And he said, "Well, no, it's not a lady, it's a guy. Somebody says he knows you, Joel." And I'm kind of worried about it. And Frank is just goading me. He's just saying, "Well, that's it. He's all sexed up. He's coming to get you." So for 25 minutes, I got more and more terrified. And I wrote a note to my wife saying, "Dear Debbie, I love you and the kids very much.
Seriously?
Please know that always, but I have to go get killed now." When they called lunch, I grabbed Frank by the wrist and I just had him like an iron grip, like he couldn't get away because he's big and I thought he could protect me. So I go over, I meet Joel, and he's this strange guy with filthy teeth and horrible breath and dirty fingernails. And he's standing there talking to me, and he said, I wrote a script for the Muppets, and I'd like to give it to you to read and let me know if maybe we could work together. And he said he'd come from Montana down to North Carolina. He had to sell his computer in order to come down to pay for the trip. Now I'm feeling sorry for him. Then he said, "Yeah, hey, I got a gift for Ben and Amy." And he named my kids, who were like 2 and 4 at the time.
Right.
And now chills are going up and down my spine. I'm thinking, how does he know my kids' names?
I've seen video of this whole experience, and the look on your face is so much terror.
Well, it was nothing compared to what I was feeling.
Finally, but he had a puppet too. Remember the puppet that he made?
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that part. Yeah, he made a Gonzo, and he said, I said, well, and it was really awful. It was just all crinkled up, just a little tiny thing that was just horrible, looked dirty. And I said, oh, good for you, making puppets and writing scripts. It's great. And then there was more. And then he said, I really want to take you and Debbie and the kids out to dinner. And I said, yeah, I can't, we're leaving next week. We're packing. We can't take any time off because we've got all these toys that we got for the kids.
He already bought, didn't he? He bought a gift card or something.
Well, he said, I thought you might have been busy. So here's a gift card for $200 to this Chinese, what was it? It was a Chinese Southern place or something, a Chinese Jewish restaurant. I said, Joel, I cannot take this. I can't take this from you. You sold your computer to come here. I'm not going to take it. I wouldn't take it. And so then he handed me a card. He said, well, that's really nice of you. I kind of figured you might not want to take it. So here's a card for me. And I opened the card and it said, congratulations, Dave. Gotcha, Steve. And it was Frank. And I had really been so scared. I'm leaving out a lot when I tell this, but Frank got away from me. I was holding onto his arm. He finally got away. Then I grabbed Bill Barretta's arm. He was nearby, and I got your brother's arm, and I was holding onto him like a claw, just
right,
trying to keep somebody who could help protect me. And finally, Steve said, "That was just a joke, Dave." And it was one of the best, man. It was great. The hell out of me.
I think the guy was just a hired actor from Wilmington or something.
He was amazing. He was so good.
And scene.
Good.